In a quiet suburb of Sacramento, California, life flowed steadily and predictably. The center of this small community was the local St. Michael's Church, where parishioners gathered every Sunday. Among them was Sarah Thompson, a 35-year-old housewife, mother of 2 children, and wife of successful businessman John Thompson. Sarah was known for her active involvement in the church community. She organized charity events, participated in Sunday school work, and was always ready to help those in need. She was considered an exemplary wife and mother, the embodiment of family values. Father Michael Burns, the 42-year-old priest of St. Michael's Church, was respected and loved by the parishioners. He was known for his inspiring sermons and attentive approach to the problems of his flock. Father Michael was unmarried and had fully dedicated his life to serving the church and community. The events that unfolded in this quiet suburb began in January of 2022. It was then that Sarah Thompson began to visit the church more frequently, explaining it as a desire to participate more in the life of the community. She started spending a lot of time helping to organize various church events, which naturally led to more frequent communication with Father Michael. No one could have predicted that behind the facade of piety and good intentions lay feelings that would soon grow into something more than just friendship between a priest and a parishioner. This is a story of how forbidden love can lead to tragic consequences, destroying the lives not only of those directly involved but also of everyone around them. It all started with innocent conversations after Sunday services. Sarah often lingered to discuss matters of faith and life with Father Michael. Gradually, these conversations became more personal and candid. Sarah shared her concerns about problems in her marriage, feelings of loneliness, and lack of understanding from her husband, who was constantly busy with work. Father Michael, in turn, found in Sarah an attentive listener. He talked about the difficulties of his calling, the doubts and temptations he faced. These frank conversations created a special bond between them, which over time grew into emotional intimacy. In March of 2022, Sarah offered to help Father Michael prepare for the annual charity auction. This meant that they began spending a lot of time alone, discussing plans and organizational issues. It was then that their relationship began to go beyond the usual communication between a priest and a parishioner. The first physical contact happened by accident. Their hands touched and they reached for the same document simultaneously. This moment caused embarrassment and excitement in both of them, which they could not ignore. From that day on, their meetings became more frequent and prolonged. Sarah began to find reasons to visit the church on weekdays when there were few people around. She brought homemade baked goods, supposedly for the parishioners, but in reality as an excuse to meet with Father Michael. He, in turn, began to pay special attention to Sarah, finding opportunities for private conversations. By May, their relationship had grown into physical intimacy. The first kiss happened in a church office after another discussion of charity event plans. Both understood that they were crossing a line, but could not resist their feelings. Sarah and Father Michael began to meet secretly outside the church. They used various pretexts, visiting sick parishioners, organizing charity events in neighboring towns. In reality, these trips became opportunities for privacy away from prying eyes. Both were aware of the sinfulness of their actions. Father Michael was tormented by guilt, violating his vows and principles. Sarah worried about being unfaithful to her husband and deceiving her family. However, the passion and emotional connection that had arisen between them seemed stronger than moral principles and fear of exposure. By the end of summer 2022, their secret romance was in full swing. They had learned to skillfully hide their relationship from those around them, maintaining the image of a pious priest and exemplary wife. However, as is often the case with forbidden connections, their secret could not remain hidden forever, and events soon began to unfold in an unpredictable and tragic scenario. With the arrival of autumn 2022, the romance between Sarah Thompson and Father Michael Burns continued to develop, becoming more intense and risky. Their meetings became more frequent, and they began to show less caution, which could not fail to attract the attention of those around them. Sarah began to neglect her duties at home. She was often absent, explaining it as increased activity in church affairs. Her husband, John Thompson, initially did not pay much attention to this, believing that his wife had found a useful occupation. However, over time, he began to notice changes in Sarah's behavior. She became more distant, was often lost in thought, and avoided intimacy. Father Michael, in turn, began to experience difficulties in fulfilling his pastoral duties. His sermons became less inspiring, and his communication with parishioners more formal. He often looked distracted and tired, which some explained as exhaustion from excessive work for the benefit of the community. In October 2022, an incident occurred that could have exposed their secret. During one of their meetings at a motel on the outskirts of town, they were noticed by Emily Green, a member of the church council, who happened to be there on personal business. Although Emily did not see anything compromising, the very fact that the priest and a married parishioner were entering a motel room together aroused her suspicions. This incident made Sarah and Father Michael realize the risks of their relationship. They decided to limit their meetings for a while, but the emotional dependence on each other was already too strong. They continued to communicate secretly, using encrypted messages and rare short meetings in deserted places. Tension in the Thompson family grew. John began to notice his wife's frequent phone calls, which she tried to hide, and her constant preoccupation with church affairs. He tried to talk to Sarah about the problems in their relationship, but she evaded serious conversations in every possible way, citing fatigue and stress. Rumors also began to circulate in the church. Some parishioners noticed Father Michael's special attitude toward Sarah and their frequent private conversations. Emily Green, although not spreading information about what she had seen, began to closely observe the behavior of the priest and Sarah during church events. By December 2022, the situation had reached a critical point. Sarah, torn by guilt towards her family and passion for Father Michael, began to show signs of emotional instability. She would either fall into deep depression or display unusual irritability and aggression. Father Michael, in turn, began to seriously think about his future in the church. He understood that he could not continue to lead a double life, violating his vows and deceiving his flock. Thoughts of leaving the ministry and starting a new life with Sarah visited him more and more often. On Christmas Eve, a decisive conversation took place between the lovers. Meeting secretly in the park, they discussed the possibility of revealing their relationship and starting a life together. However, both understood what catastrophic consequences this could have for their reputation, Father Michael's career, and Sarah's family. The conversation ended without a concrete decision, leaving both in a state of deep emotional turmoil. Neither of them could have imagined that this meeting would be the last before the tragic events that would soon turn their lives upside down and shock the entire community of the small Sacramento suburb. January 2023 began with an unexpected turn of events. John Thompson, Sarah's husband, began to suspect that something was wrong with his wife. Her constant absences, emotional detachment, and strange behavior made him conduct his own investigation. One evening, when Sarah supposedly went to another church event, John decided to follow her. He was shocked to see his wife meeting with Father Michael in a secluded spot in the city park. Their behavior left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Unable to contain his emotions, John immediately approached them. A violent scene ensued, during which he accused Sarah of infidelity and Father Michael of violating his priestly duty and destroying his family. The scandal attracted the attention of random passers-by, and news of the conflict quickly spread through the small community. The next day, John demanded that Sarah immediately cease all contact with Father Michael and file for divorce. He also threatened to file a complaint with the diocese about the priest's behavior. Sarah, crushed by guilt and fear of losing her children, agreed to her husband's terms. Father Michael, realizing the seriousness of the situation, decided to voluntarily confess to the bishop about his misconduct. He was immediately suspended from ministry pending further investigation. News of the scandal quickly spread among the parishioners, causing shock and disbelief. The church council gathered for an emergency meeting to discuss the situation. Opinions were divided. Some council members called for mercy and forgiveness, while others insisted on strict punishment. Emily Green, who had previously noticed suspicious behavior between Sarah and Father Michael, provided her observations, which further aggravated the position of the accused. Over the next week, the atmosphere in the community heated up to the limit. Parishioners were divided into those who supported Father Michael, seeing him as a victim of human weakness, and those who demanded his immediate expulsion from the church. The Thompson family found themselves at the center of public attention and condemnation. Sarah, unable to withstand the pressure, fell into deep depression. She stopped leaving the house and refused to communicate even with her children. John, despite his anger, began to worry about his wife's mental state and turned to a family doctor for help. Father Michael, deprived of the opportunity to serve and communicate with his flock, was experiencing a deep spiritual crisis. He spent his days in prayer and reflection, trying to find a way to atone for his guilt. The situation reached a critical point when an anonymous source passed information about the scandal to local media. Despite attempts by church leadership and the Thompson family to maintain confidentiality, the story made the front pages of local newspapers and news websites. Public exposure led to an even greater escalation of passions in the community. Groups of protesters began to gather in front of the church, demanding justice and punishment for the guilty. The Thompson family was subjected to constant harassment from journalists and curious neighbors. In this atmosphere of universal condemnation and chaos, no one could foresee that the worst was yet to come. The events that were to occur in the coming days would forever change the lives of all participants in this drama and leave an indelible mark on the history of the small Sacramento suburb. On the night of February 15, 2023, an event occurred that shocked the entire community and gave the scandal a new, tragic turn. Around midnight, the police received a call from a neighbor of the Thompson family, reporting loud screams and sounds of struggle coming from their house. The police officers who arrived at the scene discovered a horrifying picture. John Thompson lay unconscious on the kitchen floor with a serious head injury. Next to him was bloodied kitchenware, presumably used as a weapon of attack. Sarah Thompson was found in a state of hysteria in the bedroom on the second floor. The children were not in the house as it turned out later, they were spending the night at their grandparents'. This circumstance possibly saved them from becoming witnesses to the tragedy. John Thompson was immediately taken to the hospital in critical condition. Doctors diagnosed him with a severe traumatic brain injury and induced an artificial coma to stabilize his condition. Sarah Thompson was arrested on suspicion of attacking her husband. During the interrogation, she was in a state of severe emotional shock and could not give coherent testimony. From her confused explanations, it appeared that a fierce quarrel had occurred between her and John, which escalated into physical confrontation. News of what had happened instantly spread through the city. Local media covered the incident in real time, leading to a real information frenzy. Crowds of journalists and onlookers gathered in front of the Thompson house and the hospital where John was. Father Michael, upon learning of the tragedy, tried to meet with Sarah at the police station, but was refused. His appearance at the police building caused a new wave of public outrage. Many accused him of being the one whose actions led to this tragedy. During the preliminary investigation, the police discovered letters and messages in the Thompson house, indicating ongoing relations between Sarah and Father Michael even after their exposure. This discovery added a new twist to the case and intensified suspicions regarding Sarah's motives. The medical examination of Sarah Thompson, conducted after her arrest, revealed the presence of minor injuries and bruises, which could indicate her participation in a physical struggle. However, experts could not say with certainty whether these injuries were received as a result of self-defense or during an attack. Sarah's appointed defense attorney began to build a defense strategy based on the claim of self-defense. According to his version, John Thompson, upon learning of his wife's ongoing relationship with the priest, flew into a rage and attacked Sarah himself, who was forced to defend herself. Meanwhile, John Thompson's condition remained critical. Doctors did not give optimistic prognoses, noting that even if he survived, the probability of serious neurological complications was very high. The church leadership, finding itself at the center of the scandal, decided to completely remove Father Michael from ministry and begin the procedure of defrocking him. This decision caused a new wave of disputes among parishioners, many of whom still supported the disgraced priest. The Thompson children were temporarily placed under the care of their grandparents on John's side. Social services began an investigation to determine whether the children had been in danger in the family before this incident. By the end of February, the public was eagerly awaiting the start of the trial process, which promised to become one of the most high-profile in the history of Sacramento. Meanwhile, the city continued to seethe with rumors and speculation, and the Thompson family and Father Michael remained at the center of attention of local and national media. In the first days of April 2023, after several weeks of intensive investigation, the Sacramento County Prosecutor's Office decided to file formal charges against Sarah Thompson. She was charged with aggravated assault and attempted murder. The process of arrest and indictment took place in an atmosphere of heightened attention from the public and the media. A large crowd of journalists and local residents gathered at the courthouse, eager to see Sarah and hear the details of the case firsthand. Sarah Thompson, looking exhausted and depressed, was brought to court under heavy guard. Her appearance caused a storm of emotions among those gathered. Some shouted insults, while others expressed support, considering her a victim of circumstances. At the preliminary hearing, the prosecutor outlined the main points of the accusation. According to the prosecution's version, Sarah Thompson, being in a state of strong emotional excitement caused by conflict with her husband due to her ongoing relationship with Father Michael, committed a deliberate attack on John Thompson with the intent to cause grievous bodily harm. Sarah's lawyer, Michael Reynolds, a well-known criminal defense attorney in Sacramento, declared his client's innocence. He insisted on the version of self-defense, claiming that John Thompson was the first to show aggression, and Sarah was forced to defend herself, fearing for her life. The judge, after hearing arguments from both sides, decided to keep Sarah Thompson in custody until the start of the trial. Bail was set at $500,000, which sparked new debates about the fairness of the justice system. Parallel to the charges against Sarah, the prosecutor's office announced the start of an investigation into Father Michael. Although he was not formally charged, investigators were considering the possibility of his indirect involvement in the events leading to the tragedy. Father Michael was forbidden to leave the county and was ordered to regularly appear at the police station to give testimony. News of Father Michael's possible involvement in a criminal investigation caused a new wave of scandal in the church community. The diocese issued an official statement expressing deep concern about what was happening and promising full cooperation with the investigation. Over the next few days, Sarah Thompson's lawyer began actively working on a defense strategy. He requested access to all case materials, including the results of medical examinations, surveillance camera recordings, and witness testimonies. Reynolds also stated his intention to conduct an independent examination of the crime scene and a medical examination of his client. Meanwhile, John Thompson's condition remained stable but serious. Doctors continued to fight for his life, but the prognosis remained unfavorable. John's family hired their own lawyer to represent their interests in the upcoming trial and possible civil lawsuit against Sarah and the church. The local community was deeply divided in its attitude towards what was happening. Many residents expressed sympathy for Sarah, considering her a victim of complex circumstances and possible domestic violence. Others resolutely condemned her actions, seeing them as a deliberate attempt on her husband's life. By the end of April, preparation for the trial was in full swing. Both sides were actively gathering evidence, interviewing potential witnesses, and preparing for a fierce confrontation in the courtroom. The public was eagerly awaiting the start of the hearings, which promised to be one of the loudest and most controversial trials in Sacramento's history.